go betting in Italy. Now the news in full. The federal government has launched an ambitious plan to cultivate 1 million hectares of farmland and produce 460,000 metric tons of soybeans within 2 years, to close Nigeria's growing supply gap, strengthening food security, and elevate the country's position in the global soybean market. This was disclosed by the Minister of Agriculture and Food Security, Abubakar Kyari, during the unveiling of the National Soybean Production Expansion Policy and Strategy yesterday. He noted that Nigeria currently produces 1.35 million metric tons of soybeans annually, well below the national demand of 2.7 million metric tons, driven by rapid growth in food, feed and industrial sectors. Kyari emphasized the importance of soybean as both a nutritional staple and an economic driver, citing its high protein content and crucial role in poultry and aquaculture feed production. He highlighted Nigeria's advantage in producing non-GMO soybeans, which are in high demand in premium global markets. To achieve the policy's objectives, he called for deliberate collaboration, supportive governance and strategic investments in the soybean value chain. Benue State Governor Hyacinth Alia, also speaking at the event, described the initiative as a catalyst for national transformation and economic prosperity. He revealed that the strategy aims to create over 1 million jobs and generate an estimated 3.9 trillion naira in annual revenue across 22 states and the FCT. Alia positioned Benue as the cornerstone of this initiative, vowing to double the state's soybean output and reach 200,000 farmers with high-yield, disease-resistant seeds. Moving on, Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu has launched the groundbreaking Women Economic Empowerment Policy Roadmap aimed at addressing gender inequality and promoting inclusive economic growth. Developed by the Ministry of Women Affairs and Poverty Alleviation, the policy targets key sectors including agriculture, entrepreneurship, education, and emerging industries like technology. It proposes strategic interventions such as improved access to finance, digital inclusion, and gender-responsive policies. The roadmap was shaped through broad stakeholder engagement and aims to overcome challenges like cultural biases, underrepresentation in STEM, and labor market gaps. Governor Sanwo-Olu emphasized that empowering women strengthens families, communities, and the economy, urging collaborative efforts to bring the policy to life. The Commissioner for Women Affairs, Bolaji Dada, highlighted the roadmap's role in expanding vocational training, microenterprise support, and policy advocacy, underscoring women's empowerment as a crucial development and moral issue for Lagos State. Moving on, the U.S.-South Africa Bilateral Relations Review Act of 2025, introduced by Republican Ronnie Jackson, has advanced through the U.S. Congress Foreign Affairs Committee and is now set for debate and voting. The bill calls for a comprehensive review of the relationship between the two countries and proposes sanctions targeting South African government and ANC officials. Jackson praised the progress as step toward holding South Africa accountable, while AfriForum welcomed the move, emphasizing that sanctions should focus on corrupt politicians rather than ordinary citizens. The ANC, however, expressed defiance, stating it is prepared to face sanctions as part of its ongoing struggle for justice and equality. This development comes amid a tense diplomatic relationship between the U.S. and South Africa, which has deteriorated since President Trump took office. The U.S. has court aid issued executive orders alleging human rights violations, offered refugee status to white farmers, expelled South Africa's former ambassador, and rejected the appointment of a special envoy. Despite these challenges, South Africa's government continues efforts to reset ties and improve cooperation. In other news, in a rare development, the United States becomes a net exporter of crude oil to Nigeria in February and March 2025. Driven by reduced demand on the U.S. East Coast due to refinery maintenance and increased demand from Nigeria's new Dangote refinery, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration EIA, this marked the first time U.S. crude exports to Nigeria exceeded imports, reversing the historical trend of Nigeria being a key supplier to the U.S. The shift coincided with the ramp-up of operations at the Dangote refinery, which began processing crude in January 2024 and is targeting an expanded capacity of 700,000 barrels per day by December. U.S. crude exports to Nigeria hit 111,000 barrels per day in February and 169,000 in March. In contrast, U.S. imports from Nigeria fell to 54,000 barrels per day and 72,000 barrels per day during the same months, down from 133,000 barrels per day in January. The decline in imports was attributed to maintenance at the Phillips 66 Bayway refinery in New Jersey, which later resumed operations in April. Analysts view the unusual trade patterns as a temporary realignment rather than a structural shift. Early Tesfaye of RJO Futures and Giovanni Stalnovo of UBS both noted that while the Dangote refinery and domestic supply constraints influence the trade flows, Nigeria is likely to seek more local crude sources in the long term. They suggest that the surge in U.S. export may not be sustained, depending on future operational dynamics and crude oil sourcing strategies. And away from Africa, in a rare act of domestic dissent, Israeli activists staged a protest in Tel Aviv yesterday against what they called the weaponization of food in Gaza. Gathering at Habima Square, demonstrators marched towards the Israeli Defense Ministry headquarters, carrying sacks of flour and placards bearing slogans such as "Starvation is a war crime" and "It's being done in our name." Their protest came amid growing global condemnation over the deteriorating humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, where sustained Israeli blockade and airstrikes have pushed millions to the brink of famine. The United Nations and several humanitarian organizations have accused Israel of blocking critical food and medical aid from entering Gaza. A UN statement in June 2025 described the deliberate withholding of food as a war crime. Aid groups report that despite sufficient food stocks stored outside the Strip, entry is repeatedly denied. Within Gaza, hospitals are overwhelmed and children are dying of starvation. Human rights advocates and medical professionals on the ground say over 900,000 children are suffering from hunger, with at least 70,000 at critical levels of malnutrition. Meanwhile, backlash has mounted against U.S.-based logistics firm GFH and its CEO Johnny Moore for allegedly aiding in Gaza food distribution restrictions, described by critics as creating Hunger Games-style conditions. We go on a quick break now. The news continues when we return. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Idea TV News Update. Now the rest of the news. In business, Chairman of the Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms Committee, FPTRC, Taiwo Oyedele, has said Nigeria's ongoing tax and fiscal reforms are beginning to show positive macroeconomic results despite the painful adjustments they have required. Speaking at the Executive Summit on Nigeria's tax reforms hosted by PwC, Oyedele noted that the new tax regime is set to take effect in January 2025 after harmonization with the National Assembly. He argued that while many Nigerians still struggle, reforms have prevented what could have been far worse outcomes, including deeper poverty and economic instability. Oyedele highlighted several key indicators to show the progress being made. Nigeria has moved from a negative trade and payment balance to a significantly positive one. Exchange rate margins have narrowed with unified rates. Foreign exchange forwards of over $7 billion have been cleared, and external reserves have grown from under $4 billion to more than $20 billion. Budget deficits are declining, the spending on infrastructure has increased, and tax to GDP ratio has risen from under 10% to 13.5% in 2 years. He added that debt servicing has dropped from consuming 97% of revenue to under 50%, and the government has stopped printing money for spending, repaying part of previously printed funds. While acknowledging that challenges remain, including high interest rates, limited job creation, and weak coordination among government agencies, Oyedele stressed that the country is on the right track. He likens the current phase to planting a tree where the roots must grow deep before fruits are seen. He also clarified that individuals are largely exempt from capital gains taxes unless selling over 150 million shares, noting that most Nigerians are unaffected. He concluded by warning that without these reforms, Nigeria would be facing larger deficits, fuel scarcity, more debt, and worsened poverty. And lastly, in sports, Super Eagles and Udinese goalkeeper Maduka Okoye has been suspended for 2 months by Italian football authorities for illegal betting activities. The suspension follows an investigation into suspicious bets placed during a Serie A match between Udinese and Lazio on March 11, 2024. Okoye, who received a yellow card for time wasting during the game, became the focus of scrutiny after a surge in bets, specifically predicting his booking, most of which originated from the Udine region. The unusual betting pattern reportedly yielded over £120 in winnings at odds of 8/1. Initially facing the possibility of a 4-year ban for sporting fraud, Okoye escaped the harsher penalty after the disciplinary commission opted for a lesser charge of illegal betting. The investigation, which also involved 3 acquaintances of the Nigerian international, concluded with a decision in June 2025. His 2-month suspension will commence on August 18, 2025, coinciding with Udinese's Coppa Italia fixture against Carrarese, and will see him mix his Serie A matches before being eligible to return on October 19. Okoye, 25, has earned 18 caps for Nigeria and joined Udinese from English Championship side Watford in 2023. The incident has stirred concern within the football community and as it underscores growing issues around betting integrity in sports. And that is all we have for you on Idea TV News Update. But before we go, here is a recap of the headlines. We brought to you news that FG releases 2025 Common Entrance results. I beg your pardon. We brought to you news that the federal government targets 1 million hectares for soybean cultivation. We also brought to you news that Lagos unveils ambitious women economic empowerment roadmap. We also brought to you news that U.S. Congress advances bill to review relations and target sanctions on South Africa. We also brought to you news that U.S. becomes net crude oil exporter to Nigeria. Israeli activists protest Gaza starvation as humanitarian crisis worsens. And in business, federal government tax reforms beginning to yield results. And lastly, in sports, Maduka Okoye handed 2-month ban for illegal betting in Italy. Do not forget to follow us across all our social media platforms at Idea Television. I am Cynthia Bassi. Thank you for watching.